Perfect. And another aspect, so if you have any questions, so we invite you to use the chat or to keep your question for the later stage when we'll have the panel and the Q&A. So without any further ado-s, I would go to share my screen. I think you should see everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I will just try to go in full mode. Here we are. Again, as I said, here is the agenda with the speakers from today. Professor Michael Brown from the University of Gothenburg and chair of the Central London Freight Quality Partnership, followed by Mathieu Neveu from Urban Radar and Marie Lambert from the city of Leuven. And then a panel discussion with experts both from the private sector and public authorities listed below. And here again, so just a quick overview. So you know that last year at the POLIS conference in Gothenburg, we published the joint guide, POLIS joint guide, where we have the vision to lead transformation in cities. So to make sure that logistics is taken into consideration for cities for the planning region, and also ensure that both cities and companies ensure a constructive dialogue and cooperate each other to make sure that cities and regions have a more better planning from the urban freight side. And next slide. So also we have 5 interventions areas we identified in this guide, so that are listed here. And as you can see, so the use of urban space cover almost all of them. So so that's why it's a very relevant topic that we wish to discuss, because the solutions we prepared can be very useful for all of them. And without any further ado, I would like to now start with the first speaker of today's, which is Michael Brown from the University of Gothenburg. So I would like to give him the floor, and I will continue showing the slides when needed.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Raphael, and great to take part in the webinar today. I think this is a very important topic. I'm really glad that you're focusing on this urban space question between ALICE and POLIS. I think it's essential, and I think there's a lot been done, but there's still a lot to do. So I'm really looking forward to being part of that discussion today. Just before I start, I want to say I've had help on my presentation from 2 colleagues, Juan Pablo Castrelon from Chalmers University, who's working on a PhD, which is very much focused on managing the curbside and the conflicts on the curbside in terms of the challenge for urban logistics, looking over the next few years. And Julian Allen, a former colleague of mine from Westminster University in London, who we worked together a lot on this topic. And Julian made a very interesting presentation to the Central London Freight Partnership about a year ago. And I've used a couple of slides from that presentation, because the Central London Freight Partnership brings together the boroughs in Central London, that's the district or arrondissement, and Transport for London, the Strategic Transport Authority, and private industry, that's logistics service companies and the customers of those companies, like construction organizations, retailers, and so on. And this topic is very high on the list of that freight partnership. So for me, it's a great opportunity to take part. Okay. We can go to the next slide, please, Raphael. Okay, so the curbside. Well, I think we can all agree that it's extremely complicated, and there are many, many different users, and the number of users of the curbside space and the number of the demands on curbside space is rising all the time. We use that space for walking, eating, cycling, using our electric scooter. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that, but anyway, we do. That's often the case. Many different users requiring the space, and it's essential. And of course, in some ways, it's a very planned space, I guess you could say. But in terms of the way it's used, I think that there are some really big challenges in this space, because the space changes over time. And actually keeping track of the space, which I know sounds a bit crazy, is very difficult to do. So the changing uses that we put on the space, the changing demands, leads to a lot of problems in terms of managing that space. And that's what I want to talk about. So if we can have the next slide. And of course, balancing needs of different users is an ongoing and ever-present challenge. And I think all of you are familiar maybe with this categorization of street functions, which is shown along the bottom of this slide: movement, place, and here I added place and the environment. And then different kinds of demands. We need the space for access to services. We need the space to move ourselves, to move with with different kinds of requirements for that. We need the space for storage. We need to keep things on the sidewalk in some cases. And these are sort of increasing demands for some of these uses for space on the curbside. And very importantly, we need it for access to goods, because not by any means all receivers have the possibility to have an off-street loading facility. In many cases, the street and the curbside is the way that the building interacts with the logistics system, the urban logistics system. It's the way that the product gets into the store, gets into the office building, gets into the receiver's home. So we need to think about this access to goods. It's very important, and it's fundamental to the whole question about cities going forward. And we need to enjoy this space as well, if possible. This is a lot of requirements on a very tricky space, I would say. And I think that there's no doubt that there are really big challenges in this, because if we promote one use, we probably run the risk of diminishing the value for another user. So how do we go towards more of a win-win situation? I guess that's what we're going to talk about in the webinar, and hopefully at the end we come with some ideas about how to achieve that. Okay, can I have the next one? So let's have a look at these range of users, and I'm just going to go through these quite quickly, but we can see that people walking around, us, the people that walk around in the street, your friends, your family, your colleagues, people visiting you, students, people pushing strollers, people carrying their cases or pulling their cases in order to get to the station on time. They have a really wide range of needs in terms of this space. And in some cities, you have complete streets. In others, you have this idea of healthy streets in the London approach. And then there's a big push to make the street more usable, to make it safer, to make it a better space for everybody, so that they feel more part of the community. They can enjoy more living in the city and get more out of what's happening there. So safer, better, cleaner, and no doubt that's not so easy to achieve. It's maybe good that we write the policy statements, but achieving it's a big ask. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, Raphael. Yep. Okay, and the people who live there. What do we need if we live there? Well, we want to park our car. We want some deliveries to our home, possibly. Sometimes we need the building to be repaired, or we need a plumber to come and help fix something, or somebody to install something in our home. A lot of different requirements. Maybe in the future, more and more requirement for using the space for charging, for instance. I see increasing numbers of cables dangling across parts of the curbside, and I wonder, well, how long is this going to be okay if everybody's doing it? And I think there are big questions we need to ask about that. So residents, they have a right and a requirement and a need for space, and their space needs are changing over time, especially if, for example, they give up their car and have more deliveries made to their doorstep. Okay, next slide. And the people who have to, in a sense, make sense of this puzzle every day. The drivers and the organizations going around, looking for spaces, working out what to do, trying to keep the cost down, trying to operate safely and within the law. Importantly, safety is something that is really essential here. And of course, the curbside being a contested space with many different users, with complex regulations, it's hard to maintain high safety levels. But of course, that's a very important thing for people to do. And I'm not thinking just here about the safety in terms of the vehicle movements. There are questions around the safety for people handling the loads that they're delivering. And I know from my work with the Central London Freight Partnership that, for example, the organisations that deliver to pubs, they're dealing with very heavy barrels of beer. There are maximum distances that you can expect someone to move this kind of thing along the sidewalk to deliver it. And there's a health and safety requirement on companies to deal with that. The regulations themselves that the transport companies have to obey are complicated, with administrative boundaries cutting across streets in some cases, meaning that the amount of time you can spend for delivery at one end of the street is different to the amount of time you can spend at the other end of the street. Sure, this can all be written down, it can be codified, but it makes for stress and challenge every day that these operations take place. And many times we can say that in transport, it's not the driving any longer, it's all the other activities that occupy the time. Okay, next slide, please, Raphael. And businesses. You know, we want livable cities, but in the livable cities, we want somewhere we can get a coffee, we want to maybe look at some clothes, we want to go and buy books, all kinds of different needs for businesses, and office buildings, and construction sites, and leisure facilities. So a lot of different environments here where business needs deliveries, and those deliveries may be time sensitive. They may be something you can't just leave on the sidewalk. It won't be safe to do that. And so therefore reliability, predictability, and certainty are all really important in terms of this curbside management question. Okay, next slide. And if we look at the freight operations on the curbside, well, we can see there's been a big increase in research in this area, and that's really encouraging. So we actually are getting better and better data and a better understanding of curbside and how it's used. But the uses of the curbside are also changing very rapidly, and we need to keep the pressure on here to make sure we keep up with all of this. But freight vehicles, it's estimated, can spend as much as 80% of their journey time when they're making a tour or a round to deliver things, as much as 80% of the time, they may be at the curbside, parked, waiting to load or unload, loading or unloading, or in some cases, they're there looking for somebody to sign a document, or these days, obviously, to sign on a computer. The lack of curbside space leads to perverse impacts. So people can't find the space, so they drive around. So the lack of space at the curbside feeds congestion in that sense. And of course, in desperation, sometimes illegal behavior. So parking, double parking, parking in the wrong place, parking across an entrance to something else, which again triggers other problems like more blocking of traffic. And it's expensive. It's an expensive part of the total trip, and it's not going away at the moment. These complexities are growing, and we need to think about how to deal with them. And so this space offers, I think, one of the key areas where we can really do something important to change the way we use that space. And I know that's what the other speakers are going to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about that topic, but I think it's really important we rethink how we use this space. So in terms of the, yeah, go to the next one, that's fine. So in terms of this use of the space, I think we can think of three things: space, time, and organization. We have the space, we know that the time is important, and we can organize things differently. And to some extent, that's the whole focus of what we're talking about here. But I want to remember two things, because here we're focusing quite a lot on technology, but I want to come back right at the end to the behavior issue, because I think behavior is very important in this curbside question. Next. Because if we break down the space question, we can think about issues like the design of the city, the building design itself. Where does delivery fit into somebody designing a building? Well, in most cases, it doesn't fit in. It doesn't thought about at all. It just, well, that just happens. It's somehow we have to accommodate it. We need to think about the street design, and we need to think about the way when transport demands for space, the changes in transport and how we use transport are changing our demands for the road space and changing our demands for the curbside space. So the space is essentially something we need to always address. But we need to also think about time, because we don't use the time very effectively. We say, oh, there's no capacity, but there's no capacity at the time that we want the capacity. If we looked at the total capacity over the total time, maybe there's a lot of capacity, but we're not able to use that time very effectively. And we have the problem of peaks, and we have the time in a different sense. It takes a long time to implement change. And we need to think about organizing hierarchies of use, the allocation of space, measuring this space, the inventory of space, and then management and enforcement issues. So organization is very important. Next slide. And the change in the demand is quite profound. And this is a slide from Julian Allen when he presented the Central London Freight Partnership. And he looked at how going from a period from the 1900s right up to the 1990s, in a sense, there was quite a lot of curbside space. The main thing was about how you made the rules for this. But with the growth of car use, of course, and allocation of space for things like bus movements or cycleways, of course, that space starts to change, and how free we are and flexible we are with that space changes over that time. But perhaps the biggest changes have happened more recently than that, in the last 10 years, when we see increasing spatial allocation decisions being made and increasing demand for space on the curbside, whether that be for hire bikes, whether that be for electric charging points, whether that be for dining and drinking outside as a result partly of the COVID challenge, but also as a desire to see cities as being more livable, an increasing challenge in the demand for this space. Next slide. And so if we take that and we extend it further, which this slide that Julian made tries to do, well, he foresees an issue of reducing curbside space availability. So if we think it's a problem now, in all likelihood, if we don't find some solutions to this, the problem will get considerably worse. And we'll have to start seriously thinking about how we allocate this curbside space, how we manage it, and how we know what processes to take in order to make a difference to how we use it. Because just letting it go on as it is an ineffective and it's not a solution to dealing with this. And the last slide. Okay, sorry. And yeah, so for sure, in terms of that issue, we want to think about, well, how much loading space do we need? What kind of time is required in using that space? Where is it required? When do we need it? And how can we provide that? What kind of design techniques can we use to make sure that the space that we need for loading and unloading fits in with all the other demands that we all know exist? So the demands from the pedestrian, the demands from the person looking to purchase something in a store, the demands from somebody driving their car, the demands from for other requirements on this very precious curbside space. Okay, and the last slide. So these are some reflections to link to what I've said and to link to the rest of the seminar. I mean, this is a very critical space, but if you look back over time, it's not higher on people's list of things to worry about. Oh, it's just the curbside. But it's a critical space. It's complicated in terms of how it's used. And we still don't know as much as we need to know about how it's used. And that's important, I think. We still need to explore some of that. And it's, in a sense, a contested space because the different users all have good reasons for demanding some kind of priority. And we need to address that question of how can we satisfy these needs in the most logical, sensible, appropriate way. And it's very easy to say that, but very difficult to actually achieve that in practice. And the demand for this space is not staying the same. If anything, the demand is growing. And therefore, we can expect there to be bigger problems. So we need to have better solutions and, if you like, cleverer, smarter ways of doing things if we want to make sure that this space, that we improve the use of this space. I think if I look at how space on the curbside is sort of thought about in a lot of cases, you see it in a very piece by piece fashion. People tend to look at this bit of the curbside or that bit of the curbside. And I think when you look at something, and in the Central London Freight Partnership at the moment, we've got a working group who are trying to look at, well, what happens if we look at an area wide? So not a very big area, but let's stop looking at this 50 meters of curbside space. Let's look at the area, consider the total needs in that area, and then work out how we could plan and deal most effectively with those demands. I think flexibility is a key thing here. At the moment, I see the space as being very locked up for specific uses at specific times. How can we make the space and the way we use it more flexible? And that's about organization and about rethinking the way we deal with time and space to some extent. And the final point I want to make is that I think that we are at a very promising stage in terms of technology development and in terms of our use of data. And I think that's great, and it opens up a lot of opportunities. But it's really important that that kind of approach also is connected with engagement and with things like partnerships. So the stakeholders need to be engaged. I've chaired meetings in London and in other places where when the technology solution is proposed about how to manage the curbside, for example, the transport operators say, well, we don't like it how it is, but we don't like that proposal either. And we don't think that's a good solution. And in a sense, we need to get everybody going as much as possible in the same direction so that they can all be, if you like, participants in getting to a better place with the way the curbside is managed. So you can click to the last slide, and I just end by saying that's the last one. So thank you very much for your time. And in the last slide, it's not quite the last slide, there's one more, but it's to acknowledge that, as I said, my colleagues Juan Pablo Castrelon and Julian Allen, but any comments that I made or anything I said, they're my comments and my thoughts. So thank you very much, Raphael, and everybody. Great to meet you, and looking forward to taking part in the rest of the seminar.
Thank you very much for your very good presentation that gives also put some order on the street in literally saying, and also explain very clearly who the user needs are for FlexCurb management. That also gives us a good overview how to have a full understanding of the problem. Since time is short, I would proceed with the next speaker. So here we go into more detail with one of the several project that is tackling this issue, so which is FlexCurb. So I would like to give the floor to Mathieu. So I just let me show. Yeah, let me give the word to Mathieu Neveu from Urban Radar to will explain more in detail what FlexCurb is about. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Hello, everybody. So as Raphael said, I'm Mathieu Neveu from Urban Radar, and I'm here today to talk about FlexCurb. So FlexCurb is an innovation project in mobility. It's co-funded by the EIT Urban Mobility. Can you go to the next slide, please? So today, the curb is a highly contested asset of the real estate of a city. Curb is under a lot of pressure because of multiple factors and problems around it. Let me just give you a quick vision of what is the curb today. First of all, urban logistics is growing every day, mostly thanks to e-commerce, putting more and more trucks on the road and creating a lot of pressure on the curb in city centers. So the curb is also conflicted by the multiplicity of means of transportation. With the COVID and the democratization of bikes and micromobility in general, it's adding new usage without removing any of the old ones. And the contested use of the curb generates double parking, therefore congestion, and therefore air pollution. Next slide, please. So in order to work on the problem, city needs to be better equipped to understand the curb problem and work around it. So today, cities encounters mostly two major problems. First of all, city decisions are limited by fragmented or even inexistent curb knowledge. While some administration have some data available, such data remains sometimes untapped, obscure, with multiple access layers or with the needs of technical expertise, unstandardized formats, and so on. So cities are missing the global picture of what is the curb, who is using the curb, when is it used, and where is the curb the most used or the least used. The second problem is that cities have limited resources to answer recurrent questions about the where and the how to regulate and allocate the curb. Resources are both human, but also technological. Next slide, please. So what would be a city better equipped to answer curb management problems? So here are some examples. So that city would plan a more efficient and rational way to use the curb spaces, both in an economical point of view, but also in an operational point of view. It would be a city trying to meet the needs of the multiple stakeholders using the curbs. So we can think about the last mile logistics, active mobilities, the businesses, the residents. It would be a city who would try to improve the availability of space, mostly for logistic operations. It would be a city who is trying to incentivize cleaner and sustainable mode of transport. We can think about bike parkings, bike lanes, even charging stations, for example. And it would be a city trying to improve general vehicle flows, reduce double parking, reduce congestion, therefore increase and improve air quality. Next slide, please. So with all that in mind, we worked on the FlexCurb project and developed a web-based platform for city managers and officials. The tool is quite simple. It's composed of 3 major layers. The first one is a map visualization of curb zones. So you can filter by the type of curb you want to see, by the district you want to analyze, or see the entire city. The second one would be a descriptive analytic dashboard, where you can more focus on a specific curb information or on a specific district. And the third one, the third layer, would be a comparison one, in order to be able to compare several districts of your own city or several cities between them. So the main purpose, of the tool is, first of all, is to consolidate the digital curb inventory and to improve the curb management. We are using the CDS, so it's a curb data specification, which is a standardized format for curb data that's granted by the Open Mobility Foundations. It facilitates and it helps uniform analytics outputs and comparison between cities. It's also here to inform curb regulations, inform city policies for short-term and long-term decision-making for the curb spaces through all the layers I explained before. And finally, the tool is also here to reveal, it will be here to reveal curb usage pattern, allowing city to understand what happened in the curb, when is it happening, how is it happening, where is it happening. So city, for example, could reallocate curb usage of unutilized spaces. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we started to work on the project with 4 European cities, with Louvain in Belgium, Strasbourg and Toulouse in France, and Funchal in Portugal. Here are some feedbacks of people who worked on the FlexCurb planning platform. Marish, just after me, is going to show you how she's using and the team are using the FlexCurb tool for the city. So I'll just skip to the first sentence of this slide, that is from Jean Melounou, is from the city of Strasbourg. And he says that FlexCurb is a promising way to reconcile last mile logistics and improve quality of life in the city. That's exactly what we are trying to do with this tool, better management of the curb for logistics and everybody, while reducing congestion and improving air quality. The next slide, please. So to conclude, here are some feedback from our experience and the experience of people using FlexCurb planning today. So unfortunately, despite recent efforts from cities, there is still around 90% of the curb spaces that are allocated for private parking car or vehicle storage in general. We also saw that low emission zone and zero emission zones are good starting points toward a better work and a better knowledge and allocation of curb in city centers. But still, cities must double or at least multiply their effort to provide a better access to sustainable curb to help bicycle parking, loading zone, micromobility, car sharing, and so on. And finally, we also realize that data-oriented indicators can be a very powerful tools to inform political decision makers to help them get what's happening on the street and on the curb and help them make the good decisions. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank you, everybody, for your attention. I hope I've been fast enough. If you have any questions regarding this project, do not hesitate to contact me. Here is my email. And have a good day, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mathieu, for your overview about FlexCurb. So it was quite one of the data figures that you showed in the last slide. So which still, despite recent efforts, so still 90% of curb is still to private cars. So, and also Michael said it in the first presentation, so there's a lot of work to be done to still to address these challenges, but it's good to see that low emission zones and other endeavors like the one FlexCurve did are going in the right direction. And so to continue the discussion about FlexCurve and go into a bit more into detail into one of the pilots, Leuven, I would like to give the floor now to Marij Lambert from the city of Leuven. So Marij, over to you.
Just quick jumping in, sorry, in here. And there are some questions to the speakers, if you can have a look in the chat. Thank you.
Yes, so I see.
I think Matthew can answer it, yeah.
So I see from Hans Surmans. Mathieu, can you let me know who you are talking to at the city of yeah, with Marij? So we have seen this now. How do you integrate other available space like parking, etc.?
Yeah, so today, that's why I put it in the future. It's not yet on the platform. We are working on it. We are working on connected vehicle data, for example, or GPS data to understand how is the parking movements on the city center.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see other questions in the chat, it seems to me. So I would like to proceed with Marij. So over to you.
Thanks. So I'm Marij. I'm from the city of Leuven. I'm a project leader for the mobility team here. Leuven is a city located 20 kilometers from Brussels. We have 100,000 residents plus 50,000 students in our city. And this is a picture of our of the main square in our city. As you can see, it's an historic center. It's very dense with shops and restaurants. So there's a lot of loading and unloading going on and other traffic. And the first slide, please, or next one. Yeah, thanks. Maybe just some quick words on the use case we did in Leuven. So we wanted to make a flexible use of the shop and go places, the shop and go parking bays, and convert them also to loading and unloading zones. So we were testing flexible curb management there with the platform and that Mathieu has just explained, and with the driver's app. And drivers could check in using a QR code or based on geolocation, and they could check in on the shop and go parking bay or on an official loading or unloading zone, or just somewhere on the curbside where they stop to load or unload, and that would give us data on the actual usage of the curbside, of loading zones, of shop and go zones used by logistics players. And this way, the platform that Mathieu just informed us about is would come alive, and we would see the actual usage compared to the parking offering. Next slide, please. And the long-term scope of flexible use of these shop and go places is that we wanted to convert all the shop and go parking spaces into loading and unloading zones. Merge them in one smart zone. So shop and go parking spaces could be used by shoppers and by logistics companies. They could use several time frames. We could make it flexible so that in the morning we could use it for loading and unloading, and after 11 o'clock we could use it for shoppers, and maybe at night for residents. And then we also looked into bookable smart zones and the legal part of this and the technology that is available, but that's the long term. we didn't consider this within the FlexCurb project, but it's well, you always have to look at the bigger picture. Why are we doing this? And the use case was focused on this long-term vision or ambition. Next slide. I was asked to give you an overview of the learnings and challenges after the tests in Leuven and the ride-alongs and the service we did within the FlexCurb project. Next slide. I'll start with the technology. So the platform and the driver's app. The platform was a very useful tool because it gives us a visual overview of the curb use distribution across our city, and the regulations are linked to it as well. So excuse me, basically if you would just click on a parking bay, then you could see the time frames and the retributions. It's not only the geographical location that you see, but also the regulations linked to it. And then thanks to the driver's app, you could see the demand of the actual usage of the parking bay. The platform is very useful for starters or for people without any GIS experience, because it's a very visual and intuitive overview. So for example, our customer contact center has used it as a knowledge base. So when people called, can I park there? How long can I park there? What if I get a fine? What would it cost me? Then they would just click on the bay and then they would have all the information, and also the timeframes overruling the initial regulations. We also used it for brainstorms on flexible parking with other departments within the city or with the police. It was, if you zoom in on the platform, you can also see the shops and the restaurants and the bars present in the area. So if there are no shops in the area, you know, we don't have to provide a shop and go place, but we can see there are a lot of restaurants, so we should look into the loading zones. So there are enough loading zones for that area, yes or no? If there aren't, we should create a new one. Should we combine it with another usage like bicycle racks? Because we could see in the platform that for that specific space or area, there weren't enough bicycle racks either. So we decided to create a new loading zone and make it flexible. So in the morning it will be loading and unloading. In the afternoon it will be a bicycle rack for the students, because there are a lot of university buildings in the area as well. So the platform gives you an overview of the parking offering, but also the restaurants and shops, and the buildings and the function of the buildings, thanks to a layer of Google Maps. No, it's not Google Maps. It's another one. Also for events, we could see whether there was enough parking space within an action radius. We could compare neighborhoods and the parking offering there. So that was a really useful start, because actually data and a more rational understanding of the curbside is very important when you start working on flexible curb management. And then for the driver's app, it was in theory a good approach to measure the parking demand, but during the ride-alongs and the surveys, we found that drivers don't use phones, not even for their route planning. And the added value of the app wasn't big enough for them to change their behavior and start using an app or a phone. So it was hard to link the demand to the offering in the platform. So we couldn't set up this connection. And then also, you see this in every city, drivers usually don't park on official loading zones. They just stop and park on the curbside and load and unload from there. So actually the platform doesn't give an entire overview of the parking offering, because every part of the curbside could be potential loading or unloading zone. And for us, it would be also interesting to, if you want to give a driver an overview of the available parking space, then you would also need to add the intake of the public domain into the platform, or the roadworks and the events that are taking place. So it's not only the static parking inventory that should be there, but it's also everything that changes within the city because of roadworks or events. So that's a lack of the current platform. And then we can talk about technology forever, but we think it's not the main issue when it comes to flexible parking. So there are a lot of challenges and learnings that don't have anything to do with the technology. So I'll quickly go over them. The next slide. So the real challenges. We found that limited time is not the biggest challenge, but space is the challenge, because more space for delivery means less search traffic and less congestion, less waste of time and costs, less vehicles, less greenhouse gas emissions, less illegal parking, which means more road safety. So space and the solution for space is really key, but that has been apparent in the other presentations today. Next slide. So in our city, with a dense historic city center, parking space is limited, and flexible parking management could be the solution, but that we should take into account several conditions, like we should discuss loading and zones and solutions with multiple stakeholders before talking technology. So we have to talk to last mile logistics companies, to active road users, to the residents, to local shopkeepers, to the police, and not we should talk to their managers or to the representatives, but also to the end users, which were the drivers in the case of the ride-alongs. And I would really recommend this, to do this, to get up very early in the morning and do a ride with the drivers and follow all the deliveries, and then you see so much, and you can talk about solutions, and you will find out what would be useful for them and what is just some a solution that wouldn't be effective. So definitely recommend that. And then when you talk about sustainability, that's, well, they don't tend to listen, but if you talk about efficiency and time saving, and saving time means finding space quickly, then you're talking about something that interests them. So I learned that as well. And then when talking about flexible curb management, we should consider all parking regimes. So it's bicycle and resident parking and shoppers and loading and unloading zones. A big challenge is the legislation, the enforcement, and the street signs, which tend to stay behind. It would be, well, it's very complicated to have the signs correct in the streets, because there are so many, with flexible curb management, there's so many parking regimes and there's so many information you need to give. But people at the city of Leuven are very reluctant to have more street signs, because the city isn't readable enough. Then solutions should be scalable to other cities, because logistics companies work for different cities, and it should be the same in the whole region. And then it's also important to consider all logistics segments and identify their specific needs. So HoReCa is very different from construction, and obviously everybody is looking at the parcel delivery, but that's only 5 to 15% of the deliveries, but it's very visible. Next slide. So if you have any questions, I'm here during the discussion, and I'm willing to answer your questions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mireille, for your presentation and explaining what are the challenges and what has Leuven learned so far from flexible experience, and also from the, as a general, so from these issues. Now I just stop sharing, so, and also go through the chat if we have additional questions from the audience. Doesn't seem so for the moment. So I would.
We have one comment.
One comment. Okay, I don't see in my screen anything.
Yeah, I have one comment from Anat from JLL, so the biggest commercial property developers. So general comments, so many years of pedestrianizations have removed the curbside with promotions of restricted zones for parking deliveries, making it more challenging for serving high street locations. Such measures were taken to improve footfall for retail, but with the high street retail is declining, how are urban planners taking forward the concept for rezoning, such as locating space for urban logistics operations or for e-bike careers and so on. So that is some good comments. I don't know if any cities here can share some opinion. Otherwise, we can continue our.
Yes, maybe I can just give a reaction to that. I think it's very important to talk with all the stakeholders. We don't want, within the mobility department, we don't just want a city center with clean air and no congestion, but we want it to be a lively neighborhood with a lot of shops and restaurants. So that's why we are making time to talk to the stakeholders and to see how we can keep them within the city center, and we don't want them to move out of the city. And so even if we would install a zero emission city logistics zone, which we haven't at the moment, but that's our ambition to do this, and it's very important to make sure they have the that we facilitate this transition to this zone, and that we don't focus on the multinationals and the big companies. Well, we should also focus on them, but the small and medium-sized enterprises should be taken into account as well, because they are facing a lot of challenges with the electrification of their cooled vehicles. And we have a project going on, or we hope it will be a successful proposal, and then we can focus on this SMEs as well. I think that's important in this discussion.
Yeah, I see Michael has his hand raised.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I mean it's a general question about the decline of shops, not only in the city center but also in the neighborhood centers. And those shops, let's say, have two problems or two enemies, if you want to say so. One is online shopping with all the delivery. The other one is the shopping centers. And just to give you one example where it comes together with what Mathieu mentioned, 90% of the problem comes from parking of private cars. And ownership of private cars has an alternative in our city that's called car sharing. We have quite promotional program. And the interesting point is 80% of those who are doing car sharing in Bremen don't own a car. And we asked about their shopping behavior. And that's now really interesting because they allocate much more of their shopping in the neighborhood district and in the city center. And the frequency of going to the shopping malls is 25% in comparison to the reference group. So that's a clear signal how you can bring things together. It's not just about high street shopping, it's general to see the city and to deal also with the space question. Just to give you the number, Bremen, 500,000 inhabitant city, we would have 7,000 more cars in our city if we hadn't car sharing. And 7,000 cars, this is 35 kilometers of street space. And I think that's a part of the strategy that wasn't a little bit mentioned by Mathieu, but in general, for all the strategies, this should be a core element, number one. And the second element, as alternative to the car, needs to be mentioned cargo bikes. It was also in all your presentations mentioned. And cargo bikes have two groups, target groups. One, of course, is the commercial sector for delivery. But we should also see private micro logistics, what you do in your family, and how often grocery is the excuse for owning a car. So giving access to cargo bikes for private households could also turn it around so that you're much more able to do your grocery in your neighborhood, in the city center, which is usually close by in the city. So that's at least one option that should be mentioned here to have the picture. And again, we should talk more about the 90% of the problem than the little bit technical solutions. Marie, you mentioned that as well, that these digital tools are just a tool and are the carrots, but we have unfortunately talked also about the sticks.
Thank you very much, Michael, for this. I don't know, Marie, if you have anything any more to add to this. No. Let me see if there are any further questions or hand raised. No, I don't see any more. So I would like to continue the discussion. So many very interesting aspects have been touched upon. So also interesting would be to hear what you think. So one of the solutions for cities has been tackled so far. It's about distribution centers. We heard about talking about them quite a lot. So as the needs for distribution centers in cities are evident as they support operation and using smaller vehicles for last mile deliveries. And as you know, also there has been ongoing discussions in many countries to forbid distribution centers due to negative impacts, so dark stores, associated congestion, noise. So I would like to ask the panelists, so what are your views on establishing and operation distribution centers in cities? So maybe starting with Michael and Marie, but also then continuing to our logistic operators, so Charlotte, Magnus. So I don't know, Michael, if you have a.
Let's start with Magnus.
Yeah.
Sorry, was it Magnus?
Yeah.
Well, yes, if I have the word. I think it's important to see the whole supply chain, of course, and as it is developing today towards smaller vehicles coming from the outside of the city into the city, that creates a lot of traffic as well. So I believe a city hub is very positive because then you can consolidate freight outside the city and use it much more efficient, and then the transitions can be done closer to the customers, to more micro mobility. So I think it's very possible and a good thing to have this. And to be afraid of dark stores, yes, that is of course a problem, but let's talk about perhaps storage instead. That these are storage facilities distributed more close to the end customers. So from a city distribution center, you can distribute to the customers in a much more efficient way. by micromobility, cargo bikes and other means. So really, I think they are important to reduce congestion, reducing the amount of smaller distribution vehicles coming into the city as well. So it's not just about establishing a distribution center, but to look to the whole supply chain, really.
Thank you, Magnus.
Maybe I can
no, go ahead.
add one point. One thing that we've learned in the long history of city logistics in Bremen from our freight village is that every handling of goods adds costs. And so what is the rationale, the driving force for operators? It's if you have still a cost advantage.
Well, I think if I'm,
yeah, and that's why, for instance, it's important. We can see it that we got the shift to cargo bikes because of congestion, because of no parking space available. I mean, it's not just that we always talk about carrots. That I have seen so many city logistics projects that had a funding scheme for consolidation centers, and as soon, or not directly, but shortly after this funding stream terminated, also operation terminated, and they went back to the traditional way. So I'm a little bit afraid that we always talk about some carrots, some new pilot projects, and that are not economically sustainable.
Well, I fully agree, and we've done a project in Stockholm, Scania, and 18 other partners, and really looking into this. Strange that there are hundreds of city hubs projects that ends, but then we look at who is really gaining on this. Of course, the city wants to reduce congestion and improve environment, but who is gaining? And that's really the real estate owners. By getting a nice area where people want to rent their shops and where people want to live, they get the profit from this. The transport operators lose, yes. So I think, and I think one of Mike Brown's PhD students in their thesis show that the real estate owners and sort of, I don't remember what they called in English, but business associations in an area, they gain from this. So finding a business model where the winners, you see the value for those who win and those who lose, and you get a fair distribution of cost and revenues. So I think the real estate owners is really important in this puzzle, to include them in the business model and in the discussion, because we are focusing too much on transport operators, and they will definitely not gain on a city hub, not much at least. It's of course good value for, you know, wanted to do something about environment and things like that, but those who really wins on this setup, you should include them in the calculations.
Hi, I'm Ying here. We have JLL here in the participant list. We actually tried to invite them to join these panels, but they declined the invitation. Okay, and maybe we can hear from the logistical operator, Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you. That could be interesting to get the logisticians' point of view on that. So maybe just a bit of context. I just would like to share very few slides on that. I would like to talk about also the schizophrenia we are all facing in, and especially logisticians in terms of pressure we get from everybody. And I'm not saying we don't have responsibility. It's just to get another point on the context. There is a booming market. The first challenge for us is that we have made studies together with Roland Berger at FM Logistic, that there is a specific, let's say, pressure in what we have named the ultra-dense environment cities in Europe, which have higher density, congestion rate, and revenues per inhabitant. And in those cities, let's say the need for e-commerce deliveries is even higher than in other cities. And the second point is especially the fact that we get from clients, customers, a lot of pressure on B2C deliveries, and they assume, just for you to know, and that doesn't mean we don't have responsibility again, but they assume that the delivery is free or cheap, at least, that it should be as quick as possible from D4 to D1 and even to same day H2, transparent, of course, flexible, convenient, reversible. And environmental expectations are only one, but a smaller one of this criteria for last or end consumers delivery. So this is where I call very often about schizophrenia, because we all want a cleaner city as citizens, but we all want our goods to be delivered as a free, flexible way, speed, etc. So this is all we have to face as a logisticians. And in those cities I was mentioning, majority of the e-shopper choose home delivery. So this is the example of Paris, but it's the same in other of the 30 cities I mentioned earlier. And to do that, retailers as well as logisticians have, let's say, multiply, again, this is the view of Paris, but it's probably the same in all other cities, have started to open DCE or yeah, mostly distribution centers around Paris. So yeah, we want to, let's say, organize and rationalize the urban space, but on the other side, we are facing schizophrenia of all type of actors. So just to stop that, what we try to do as logisticians is two keywords. I would say first of all our mission is mutualization, and second point is the use of low emission vehicles. But and the mutualization is even reinforced because of the use of the low emission vehicles. Because if I am a bit provocative, if we allow big trucks to enter the cities, we all know that we're going to have less CO2 and less congestion, because we know that urban trucks and vans are emitting much more than heavy good vehicles. So this is why we need distribution centers. And this is why, and I'm not talking about dark stores, I'm talking about distribution centers, because we, let's say we, as sustainable logisticians, we probably need to acknowledge that there is a need for quick delivery, but not a need for, let's say, getting shoes in 2 hours as home deliveries. So this is another topic. So to do that, we're going to have to be flexible on the urban space, but this is another question that we will touch probably later. And we need to avoid as much as possible home deliveries, because this is not economical, as you said, Michael, and because this is the kind of negative externalities that we want to avoid. So this is why I very much also push for lockers, and especially new kind of lockers that we are trying to open at FM Logistic, but many others, because someone mentioned, and I think it was you, Michael, that one of the enemies of the shops are e-commerce. So this is why, in terms of, let's say, extending the growth of those shops, we should and we could enlarge the use of lockers to the local shops. And this is what we are trying to do. But yeah, why this is in cities? Because we want to mutualize, and because if we want low emission vehicles, we need some DC to consolidate the flows, as you mentioned, Magnus.
Thank you, Charlotte, for adding this. I see other hand raised. I think the first one was Marie.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say a few things about the role. First thing about the role of the city when it comes to consolidation centers. We would like to have this happening in Leuven, but it's not happening at the moment. There is a private consolidation center, but they're considered as a competitor of transporters. We see that the companies are reluctant to use consolidation centers because of branding issues, liability and security issues. So when we do a pilot project, we prefer to build neutral registration platforms for deliveries, and that makes in that way logistics companies can share their data with the city, but not with the other companies, with the competitors. And then we give them some reports about the optimization scenarios that can be done if they would cooperate and maybe use a consolidation center. That's one thing I wanted to say. Then about the lockers, 25% of the citizens of Leuven are using these lockers. We have a dense network of a locker in 400 meters of your home. So that's a good start to increase that amount of users. And I think as a city, our role is also to empower the citizens. And if they could change the behavior, then maybe we can change maybe we can have a cleaner city if they would change their behavior. So we're focusing on that in some projects as well. And for example, in the Green Log project, it's a Horizon project. We're putting the end consumer as on the wheel, so they're steering the deliveries. They say we're going to create a digital platform in which they can register when they need to receive a parcel, and then the platform would be used as a logistics as a service platform, and logistics companies can offer a sustainable delivery to those end customers, and those end customers could be shop owners or just citizens living in the city. And so we're curious to see what happens if they would decide, I want to have my parcel delivered in a sustainable way, which is in the green way, or and not the same day or next day, but I have time, I can receive my shoes in 3 days time. No harm done there. So that's another project. And then maybe something about the first mile delivery. We have a platform for that as well. So the shopkeepers are using a platform for first mile delivery, and then our bpost, or the National Postal Services, do just one round in the city to pick up all those parcels, and then they bring it to their consolidation center, and then it goes to the end customer. So it's consolidating from the first mile. Just some examples from the field.
Thank you, Mare. I see many more hands raised. I think the next one was Magnus, and then Michael.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add something that is connected to what Mike said about area and space management, and that is, of course, if we could distribute it off-peak. And with now I'm of course talking from Scania's side, when electric trucks now is available, you can deliver in the city without major emissions. Of course, it's particles from tires and stuff, but no emissions, and they are silent. And we have tested in Stockholm again in this project, together with Harvey Logistics and McDonald's stores, tried off-peak delivery, and it shows that you can do the same job 30% more efficient with these electric trucks. And it's a system with connected goods and connected vehicles, and connected to the building with digital locks. So when you load the stuff on the vehicle, you have sensors to know that it's the right goods, and when the vehicle approaches the house or the McDonald's restaurant, you get a signal that this is the right delivery. So you get a digital locks, and the driver can deliver at night to McDonald's. And that has a lot of upsides, of course, the transport efficiency and the possibility for McDonald's to unpack when they want. So they get delivery when they want. But again, we're not naive. We know that it's a complex system that needs to be approached in many ways. You still have noise with the handling material. You have to silent handling material, and you not have to be assured that the pavement outside don't have potholes and it's silent as well, and the driver must behave and not slam any doors and stuff. So there's still a lot of things to be done. But one of the other problems is trust then, if you don't want unauthorized persons in the building, of course. So you have to have contracts and deals, signed contracts, because it's a time slot between the delivery and the proof of delivery. But that can be handled in bilateral agreements. So that's one thing. And Harvey Logistics is very pleased, because when they saw the price tag on the electric vehicles, they saw that the price is high for buying the vehicle, but the operating cost is very low. So they want to use it day and night. So this is a good way also to promote electrification in the city. But again, I'm not naive. We are not naive. We know that there's a lot of obstacles, but this is something that's really interesting, and that the transport operator, Harvey, is very interested in, and will continue the deliveries. It's not perfect for all goods, of course, but it's a start, and it's a way to distribute into a city center at night time. And then if you have the storage facilities, or what we would like to call it, distribution center, it can be the last mile with cargo bikes or other more environmentally suitable deliveries. So I just wanted to highlight that there are technical measures, but it is indeed, like Mike said as well, very much about behavior and trust. Thanks.
Thank you, Magnus. So over to Michael, who was next one.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to go back to a comment that Christina Stenman-Jorgensen put in the chat, I think, earlier on, which was to say, what about the carpenter's vehicles? I think the service sector is really important, and I think that in terms of curbside use, we should make more, we need to include some work on this, because I think from work that I was familiar with in London, the estimate was that between 25 and 30% of the van movements in London was some kind of service activity. Now, some of that was for construction sites, but who may not have the same issue about where they're to park, as perhaps that's not such a big problem. But a lot of those vehicles, they have a very different dwell time pattern. So the time that they need to spend in a specific location is very different. So you get a double problem. If they use the space for the load that's set aside for loading, then that's blocking that space from the people who need it for maybe 20 minutes or so, and in some cases as little as 10 minutes. And yet in the other case, they don't have anywhere, so they're rather inefficient in terms of their operations. And this isn't a good thing. So we need more, I think we do need to include this other category of service traffic and get an understanding of their role, because their needs are very different to the kinds of needs that Charlotte presented, where there's this very pressure to be very close and very instant, quick deliveries. I think the needs they have are different, and we should take account of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your explanations. I also hand over to Simon Hayes, who was hand raised.
Thank you. I missed, I was late to connect, and I apologize for that. I'm intervening here on behalf of Banner Pedal, which is a cargo bike operator, neutral last mile operator from Barcelona. When I was asked to intervene, I was thinking about distribution centers for the central area of the city of Barcelona, where most of the city center is pedestrianized. So seeing the map from Paris, which is a similar city in many ways to Barcelona, I can see that we're talking about also the distribution centers around the city. But it doesn't really matter, because when you have dense cities with pedestrianized policies of promoting other mobility users in the center, the logistics issue is basically trying to do a job with very few opportunities. The curbside opportunities are limited, and I think Scania's intervention sort of points to the fact that you are going to need, and Charlotte mentioned that the economy, the pollution performance for bigger vehicles is better. So the curbside that you have in the center will have to have a hierarchy where you're servicing the needs for larger goods, or what we call the hotel, restoration and catering sector. And therefore, there is a role for cargo bikes for parcel deliveries. So if we accept that that's a definite role, we could talk a little bit about what cargo bike operators are trying to do and how they're trying to make it more efficient. So in that respect, Van and Pedal have got 10 years of experience. Most of those 10 years have been working with the City Council. So the City Council has helped them in various ways. First, allowing them to test their new vehicles with an exemption to on-street transshipment, so that before they could actually prove that they were able to actually acquire a fleet, the authority helped making a pilot. So if you haven't done that and you want to think about cargo bikes, you should do that first. That'll probably show that there is probably a way that they can work together and find the business. And then it's a case of how will you make a hub? And I'm talking about hubs for micro distribution in the central area. And I was interested to see the Paris thing, because they won the prize this year for European Parking Association, doing some very interesting transformation of off-street car parks to work for frozen goods or cold goods for cargo bike deliveries. So you could look at Paris to see how they're doing it off-street hubs underground. In Barcelona, what they've done is basically agreed that each district needs to have some public space. And the way to reduce the costs for cargo operators is to lease them this space while they actually receive the information from the operator about the deliveries they make. Because the other thing, although they have a some policy to promote cargo bikes, basically it's saying, we'll do what you need, but you give us the data so that we can see if our plan is actually going forward. So I think that that's a definite thing that cities need to consider. And then if you go beyond that, you can make actual pilots and try to either renovate the fleet more quickly, or work on aspects we've worked on recently are automating the transshipment by cargo bikes are getting bigger and more robust. The standards in Europe are permitting bigger cargo bikes. So you can actually transship a set of goods on a Euro pallet into a cargo box that's demountable from the cargo bike. So those types of innovations are also possible. Thanks for letting me join, and I don't know if that fits with all that you've been discussing.
Thank you, Simon, for your intervention. I see also the hand of Charlotte raised.
Yes, if I can rebound on let's say on 2 points. First one about the type of distribution centers, or let's say the criteria we have to take into account as a retailer or logisticians, probably much more as logisticians to do that. So to let's say to optimize the use of the land in the cities, to have those type of DC here or in or near the city, we have to, let's say, either take the high buildings, so either the use of the building on the whole, let's say high, or either also in the parking. We want to take so the high of the buildings, the vacancy of the buildings, the let's say the temporary availability of some buildings. So this is what we are doing, most of us in parkings again, or in bus stations where they are not used during nights. So this is especially what we are doing with the LEAD project or the Plume project in France. We are also trying to take the advantage of hybrid space, so spaces where we can do several things at the same time. So offices, shops, logistics things, taking into account, of course, the let's say the noise and everything that is related to logistics activities. So the flexible use of the land, that is a really key areas. And then we have to add on that for those DCs, eco-design of the building, so green aspect, connected buildings, so to charging infrastructures, but also, let's say, potentially connected for if we have an opening lockers, so that they can be connected for automated availability, and easing the connection with multimodality. So if possible, and this is only an option today, if possible, connected with rail, with river, with everything. So this is probably the way we can optimize the use of urban space to put into DC in the cities. And on the cargo bikes, yes, this is part of the solution, of course, not for all goods, but for some of the goods. And I come back again on the economic models, because the issue over there is that if we are not in a, let's say, very constrained area, we have to find a sustainable model, because when we have one truck, we have one driver, but when we have one cargo bike, we have also one driver. So, and the cargo bike is much more small. So we have indeed the cost of the driver, so that is one point, and we have also the handling costs for the retailers or for the distribution shops, because when they receive one truck, they have a handling cost associated. When they receive 7 cargo bikes, they're going to have to adapt their handling processes on the city. So this is not easy. This is part of the solution, and definitely also in that area we have to pay to be very careful about the social conditions of the van drivers, truck drivers, cargo bike drivers. I know this is a hot topic for all of you in the cities. So this is part of the, let's say, the warnings we have to pay attention on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I see also the hand of Michael raised.
That's true. That's my hand. Yeah, Simon, thanks and nice seeing you again. A little statement and some insights from the ULADS project, the Horizon 2020 ULADS project that we coordinate. First of all, cargo bikes, to make them more efficient. I think the model that we see here in Bremen is quite interesting, because the delivery is containerized. So it's pre-consolidated in the consolidation center, and not each and every package needs to be handed over from a truck to cargo bikes. I think this is an important step forward to have a higher efficiency of the entire process. That's number one. Number two, and that's quite something, at least I was quite astonished about, the average weight of the cargo delivered by bike here is 63 kilograms. So we are not talking primarily about parcels. It's a B2B situation, and you can use these heavy load cargo bikes to transport a Euro pallet or one of these rolling containers, these standardized containers. That's number one. And of course, another point that we did not discuss about of the wider picture, if you want to promote delivery by cargo bikes, you need good cycle infrastructure, because these vehicles are long, they are wide, they're heavy, and the overall cycle infrastructure, the overall cycle friendliness of a city is, of course, a quite important point. Then it comes to the city center and pedestrian zones. One thing also in ULADs, and you may look now more to Mechelen, so close, not so far away from Leuven, Mechelen and also B-Post, they are using for the city center a combination of bicycles and self-propelled trailers. So you can go in completely legal into the pedestrian zone by pulling these self-propelled trailers. There are models like Kala Cargo or Neuville, and they have tons, B-Post has tons of these trailers. You can use them in addition to a cargo bike or normal bike, and you can enter a city center as a pedestrian and do delivery. I think this is a point that we did not touch at all this morning. So just to give you some insights, 3 insights: cycle infrastructure, pre-consolidated containerized delivery, and self-propelled trailers to add up a little bit into the picture from ULADS. And you can find more information if you go on the ULADS website, ULADS, ULAADS.eu.
Thank you, Michael, also for bringing the interesting insights from ULADS that we also know have been shared. Feel free to also post in the chat if the website, yeah. For everybody, I see we're running out of time, so maybe just I see the hand raise of Magnus, very quick comment, and then I leave the word to Charlotte for the closing.
Yeah, sorry, just a comment reflecting to what Michael said in the beginning, that the problem is really the private cars. And indeed, that is a problem as the car users are an important voter category. So I think the mayors are a bit afraid to remove them. But working with car sharing, like you said, is really important, and that would be incredibly good, because it not only it will create space, removing cars will create space that you can use for storage facilities or transshipments or distribution hubs dynamically, perhaps. And I think we've seen that in Paris, that you use that empty spaces from cars to many things. But and again, in accordance to that, to what I mentioned about the area, that a block, that a shopping area will be much more attractive and livable. With the less cars, less cargo running there. It will improve the value of this, and it will improve the shop to return to shops and not shop at home. If you do a block in an area very attractive and livable, you can have shops and it will regain. So again, cars is really a problem, and car sharing, or how to make this distribution or with the passengers and freight without having to dependent on your private car is really, I agree on that, Michael. That's important. That was just a comment. Hope it was not too long. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So I think this is time to thank everyone for your availability, presence, remarks, and especially the speakers for their very, very interesting intervention today. Just to remind you that in December 2021, POLIS and ALICE, we launched a joint guide for public and private sectors to work together towards zero-emission urban logistics. The guide is still available, of course, and to, let's say, spread this knowledge or this content in 2022, we have organized this webinar series to disseminate the joint guide, to deepen our understanding and to bridge the knowledge on the gaps we may have on the different topics. So 5 webinars were organized, and you will also be able to hear the summary of these webinars at the POLIS conference, which will be held in a few days, 10 days, I believe. So on behalf of ALICE membership, I really deeply thank POLIS and their member cities for their contribution to zero-emission urban logistics. and the deep collaboration we have all together. I thank you also, Raffaele, for organizing those webinars together with Yanning from Alice and Pablo as well from Alice. So thank you again. And let's say that we keep in touch, keep in touch during the next POLIS, let's say, conference, but as well during the next events next year. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice end of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.